I'm Kristen Baldwin from Yahoo TV, and we're very excited to have Kate Walsh here with us to talk 13 Reasons Why. So, Kate, why don't you start by telling us how the role came to you and what was your thought process going into it and saying, yes, I'll do this?
Yeah, let's see. Let's get this timed down here. My agent and manager had called and said there's this great project that Brian Yorkie and Tom McCarthy are doing, and it was like, okay. And I knew Tom from way back, and I had heard of Brian, and of course, Next to Normal, and I knew that he'd won the Pulitzer for that. I'm like, sounds good. They sound like talented guys. No, and I quickly read it, and as I like to say, it was a page turner just reading it, but it was really like a swiper because I read it on my iPhone, and it was just one of those beautiful scripts that I could see the movie as I was reading it, and then when I got on the phone with them to just discuss it, because my concern was just in terms of just as an actor, like, is this going to be just the kids series, and how much will it actually, where did they want to go with? As you can see in episode 1, you just start meeting Mr. and Mrs. Baker. I'm like, how far do they go? Because while I had a great experience doing Perks of Being a Wallflower, that movie in the editing room ended up being an insular sort of high school experience, and it was all about the kids, and so I just wanted to make sure, because you could easily go that, I felt, and they were very clear. And Tom had said that when he talked to Brian about it, he was like, do you want to go that way or do you not want to go that way? And Brian felt very passionately that while that might work for like a 90-minute film, it wouldn't for a series, not only just thematically and creatively did it need to be broader and go outside the sort of it would be claustrophobic in just the school, but he really felt creatively, and it was important to kind of ripple out and show, what was happening, how it affected not just Hannah and the other students in the school and the teachers, but the parents, the community, and that to succeed as a series, you'd have to explore all those areas. So I liked that. I was like, okay, good, because
I think and that's a great point, because I was wondering, sometimes on a teen drama, it becomes all, quote unquote, a teen drama becomes all about the kids, and the parents are there to be like, oh, honey, and then walk off, so
Yeah.
it makes sense that was something you were concerned about. Did you read the book that, the best-selling book that it was based on, or did you prefer to prepare separately from that, or what?
Yeah, I didn't read the book. I just wanted to go because my feeling was Brian adapted it, and so I wanted to go from Brian's script and the rest of the writers through the series, because I know he took probably creative liberties to adapt, and I didn't want to have too much information going from the book. But I did, I spoke, they were really great in that they gave us great resources, people to speak to. I was able to talk to parents of a child who died by suicide, which was, the unimaginable. And then I was able to speak, they had this great psychiatrist from Stanford, Dr. Who, that I spoke with as well, that specialized in families that had lost children or to suicide. So that was really helpful to sort of consult and talk about the dynamic. But again, so that's really how I sort of prepared, and then, yeah.
I'm interested to know, as a performer, how do those conversations really help inform your performance? Obviously, you want to be true to what the experience is, but what does it do for you as an actress when you are then taking that to the scenes?
Well, it was hugely, it's such, when I said yes to it also, I really considered I was going to be carrying this kind of energy for, 6 months, 5 months, and even talking about it, you're just like, oh, it's so gutting, and it was so heavy. And I really wanted to be able to do honor and make it as accurate as possible. It's such a unimaginable thing that happens, and I definitely didn't want to, even with artistic liberties that maybe Brian was taking for the series or whatever the show, I didn't want to be in a place where I would just in some way not be, I felt accurately sort of doing honor to them and representing them. And also because it was such a specific time frame, I really wanted to talk to the parents, like, the series takes place 3 weeks after Hannah dies, and is over about a 2-week period. So it's just 3 to 5 weeks, really. And it's so sudden. And so I wanted to get as specific as possible with with wardrobe and makeup. And I just, it was really helpful to ask, the mom questions and say, what is my instinct was you barely get out of bed and barely move and would barely get dressed. And so I was really specific with wardrobe, and it's a new series too. So with new series, everything's a little chaotic. So I was just very specific about wanting it to be very obviously dressed down, simple, and repeating outfits, and no makeup, and then grief makeup, and then sort of the contrast between that and the sort of joyful life of before was also a big thing. But it was really helpful to hear from the psychiatrist too, like the different dynamics between parents that happen and different roles that they play and how they support each other, but then how they sort of take turns in their grief and all of that. And Brian really wrote to that as well.
And you really see that as the series goes on, as Olivia and Andy really, Olivia has a crusade almost, she's really focused on trying to find out what happened. And while Andy is invested in that too, he also, it seems like he's a little bit thinking, what good is this going to do? We need to move
on.
Forward.
Right. So that was, yeah.
So it is really tough material. You mentioned, you were going to be carrying it around with you. And one of the fans tweeted to me when I said that I was talking to you, how do you not take it home with you? Or do you take it home with you? And what are your coping mechanisms when you're dealing with such heavy material?
Yeah, I have an acting coach or a person I work with in LA, and she's amazing. And I talked to her about it, and we were just I had developed a little kind of ritual. One thing that made it a little easier was I flew back and forth from LA to Northern California. And so I could sort of leave Mrs. Baker in the Bay Area and then get back on the plane. But as soon as I got on the plane from Burbank, I usually flew Burbank, it started to just get a pit in my stomach. And, but even, I was able to sort of leave it on the set, and then, but it was very lonely. It was very lonely to be up there. They would shoot us. They were very gracious in boarding, Brian and I out. So they shoot 2 episodes at a time on the show. And one director takes those 2 episodes, and we have about 17, 18 days to shoot those. And so they'd board us all, and they'd shoot us all out as quickly as possible. And then we'd go home. So it was really lovely, not only schedule-wise, because I was shooting another movie or 2 during the time I was doing that, but also just psychologically, it was great to be able to go away, But it was a very lonely experience. You can't help. And poor Catherine, my God, she's so amazing in it. And we'd always check in on her because it's she said she was interested. She was like, I started to feel the loneliness of Hannah. Like I started to take on social anxiety and all this stuff. You can't help but just carry that, posture and everything. Yeah.
We will talk more about 13 Reasons Why, but, you are so well known for dramas now. People may not remember you got your start, big start in comedy. Big breakthrough on Drew Carey's show as Nikki Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Which was, a great role that a lot of people really loved. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about landing that role at that point in your career and what that experience was like, because that was a huge hit show.
Yeah, that was actually a very sort of romantic get, if you will. I was living in New York and starting to make a living as an actor, but still waitressing. It was every waitress job. I was like, bye-bye, and I'll see ya, gonna go. And then I'd be like, can I have my job back? Can I get my shifts back? I'd like, see ya. And then again, like, can I cover your Friday shift? So this one was actually Mark Sachs, I believe. I put it on tape, and they wanted to meet me in LA. Bruce Helford, who ran the show, and Drew. And I was so excited, and I'm like, what do and he's like, well, pack your bags, sweetheart. But it was like, pack your bags for either 2 days, because if you don't get it, they'll fly you right back home, or a month. Because if you get it, you start shooting right away. And I was like, oh, okay. So I gambled on myself and packed for a month, and went, and it was really exciting. It was so fun. It was fun at that time in sitcoms. It was before the single camera comedies, and really before a lot of, other than there were still, Brett Butler and Roseanne Barr and Ellen, but it wasn't, there was just those few female stand-ups. So for female roles with a stand-up comedian, you were usually just the girl. It's like, oh, honey, like the own honey part. So to be able to have, when they pitched me, you get to be a girl. We're going to establish that you worked really hard to lose all this weight, but you start dating Drew, and you just get bigger and bigger because you start eating like him, and then eventually we're going to put you in a fat suit and prosthetics. I was like, this sounds awesome. And this is before there were any fat suits. This is before Friends, before Courtney did it. So it was, that was just really cool because it was something to play. And my background is Chicago theater, both comedy, improv, and straight theater. And it's where I got my equity card. And so I was really excited to have this arc to play and not just be, the smiling, bubbly girl next to the chubby comedian. So, and he was such a dream to work with, and it was a huge hit show. And I watched the show. I actually watched the show, and I was like, oh my God, so it was great. But I remember before the first taping, Jerry Cohen, who is, a veteran sitcom director, came up to me right before my first entrance ever on the show. He's like, you know to hold for laughs, right? And I was like, yes, I do. But I was like, way to make me feel super confident. It's like, yes, I do. Anyway, but yeah, but he was wonderful, and it was a great show to be a part of. And I met great friends on that show, still friends with them these days. So.
And what would you say sort of the single biggest effect it had on your career was at that point?
Well, it really got me a lot of recognition in LA. I was still living in New York, and I moved out there just for the show. I was living in the Oakwood apartments. I don't know if any of you have been to LA in the Oakwoods. I had a Murphy bed that was like a mirror, and it would pop out of They gave me a living stipend, but I was too nervous because I was just like, I just want to go to work. And I was too overwhelmed by the bigness of LA to try to find a place. So I just opted to stay at the Oakwoods, which is just really a funny experience. I'm sure if you've ever lived there, it's really ridiculous. But it was great. Here's the funny part. They're like, this is it. This is your break, sweetheart. Yeah, you're going to, and everyone expected me because I was recurring on it to book this big pilot or my own show or something afterwards. And that pilot season after that show, I tested literally for 8 different shows and didn't get one of them. It was the biggest disappointment ever, probably to my agents and manager at the time. I was I kind of came home with my tail between my legs to New York and then took myself on a vacation with my tax return. So I was like, I better celebrate. And I called Liberty Travel. I'm like, I'm going to go to somewhere with powder white sand and turquoise water, on the postcard. So yeah. So that's what I did to celebrate not working. But it was really, I say that because it was so devastating because I really had, and there was all this pressure and I had these high hopes that I was just going to come right out of it. But I wasn't, I would get nervous, and sometimes with testing is just brutal. It's really terrible. They do it in a more humane way now, but it was really, going into a silent office packed with people. It was so many different ways, or a theater like this where you're just blind and no one says anything. It was terrible. So I got shoe notes. I remember they're like, have her come back. Her shoes aren't sexy enough. You just get weird shit. I literally went to the Beverly Center and I was went and bought a pair of shoes. She's New York. She's like, we got to get her whatever. It's ridiculous, but.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it worked out, though.
It worked out all right, ultimately.
Addison Montgomery, of course, became your sort of signature character.
Yeah.
A lot of Addison fans here. First on Grey's Anatomy, and then, of course, spun off to Private Practice. And successful spin-offs are incredibly rare, so congratulations on that. And talk about the challenges of moving an established character from one sort of, narrative to her own narrative. That must have been, both thrilling but also challenging.
Yeah, it was challenging. It was sort of an offer I couldn't refuse from Sean. I was like, all right, let's try it. But one of the weird things was when we first started doing, she was, the part of a side of a love triangle and Grey's, and this character and sort of the wicked woman from the East, coming in to destroy poor little Meredith and, just rain on their love parade. And so it was a real character, and she was very funny and dry and fast and kind of. And then Shonda started turning her over on showing her tender underbelly the way she definitely does with all of her characters. And but when we moved to Private Practice, I think the network had sort of done that thing that networks sometimes do, which is now she's a lead, so we have to make her more likable, and make her more Meredith-y. And I was like, now I'm like this girl that's a woman girl that's like, what am I gonna do? I don't know. So it took a while to figure it, like to still, I think they were afraid they couldn't have a strong lead that was still maybe a little unlikable in some ways, or harsh, or I don't know. It took them a while to kind of find that in the first season. But then they feel like they did. And she got a little more, evened out. But it was like an interesting idea to try to take her as just when she was just a piece of this whole other machine and try to figure out who Addison is with this new environment. In a way, I feel like it worked even in that first season because it's a woman moving to a new city and starting her life over. So that's what I have to say about that.
And what do you think you took from it in terms of lessons that you will take through the rest of your career in terms of, performance and just carrying a character? Because that's a unique experience that very few people have.
Well, for me, I think it goes back to, where I came up, which is in Chicago theater, which is ensemble based. And I went to the Piven Theater Workshop, and so theater games and saying yes and listening and Chicago's like the home of the group theater. It really is. And whether it's Second City or Steppenwolf or whatever, ensemble and storytelling is sort of the main thrust. And so I really like being part of an ensemble. So it was great to have like this group of amazing actors to work with on Private Practice. Amy Brenneman, Taye Diggs and Tim Daly and Paul Adelstein, who's one of my oldest friends. We used to wait tables together in Chicago. He would give me rides to voiceover auditions because I didn't have a car, and he's so good. And so to be able to work with him, actually, and then of course Audra McDonald and everyone, Katie, they were just so good and strong. And that was, I just feel like you're only as good as the people you're playing with too,
So one question from the audience, Jennifer says, you were terrific as Dr. Addison Montgomery. Is there any chance you'll be making an appearance on
I get
Grey's?
asked that, I think, literally every day
There's
my life.
There's a part 2.
Oh, okay.
If not, please ask Shondaland to have you on Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, or The Catch.
Oh my God.
So
that's so nice. That's very kind. I think that we feel like we sort of like spun Addison around in every different direction and, took a great look at her for almost 10 years. So I think that for me, it's not, I'd never say no to Shonda. So if there's a special thing to come back for, but we kind of already miss all those boats, they sailed those ships, whatever the metaphor is. I didn't make it to Derek's funeral. I didn't even know about it until someone told me. I was like, oh, I better watch this. Let's see what happened to him. How'd he die? But so we've eclipsed Logic. Logically, I would have been back so many times, but we've got other people on the case now. So but I do. I mean, she's got such an amazing shows, and I love her so much, and I had such a great ride. But for me, it's such a blessing to have an audience and critics like a show, and it's rare, and it's. But as an artist, you get bored. No one ever tells you because you just want to get. I just wanted to get work, and then you get recognition. You're like, yay! And then you're like, oh, I'm still playing her. Interesting challenge, but very happy to be working. But so one of the things I love about, this last year, or since I left private practice, would be able to go and play different. I've always thought of myself as a character actress. So to be able to go and play different characters, that was also one of the reasons why, look, Mrs. Baker in 13 Reasons is, you could argue she's a peripheral character. It's the kids' show. But I loved the challenge of trying to portray this unimaginable event and in such an important, I felt, cultural story that should be told and discussed and seen and talked about. So that's the gift for me of being able to like not be on a network show that's the same character 22 to 24 episodes a year. It's 10 months a year. Then you're burned out and you don't want to do anything else anyway. So to be able to go and play Gina Hess on Fargo and then, do, my own sitcom it was just 13 episodes, but Bad Judge was a great experience, and I got to executive produce that. So that was great. But then to be able to do a play here in New York and a movie and then a series, it's really a good dream. That's sort of my, it's a good dream.
So 13 Reasons Why, you're starring with a cast of mostly newcomers, and that must, how does that experience differ from working with an ensemble of seasoned performers like you have before?
Well, it's they're so good. all the kids. Even the ones that were unknown, or I mean, Dylan has been working for a long time, and a couple of kids have been working since they were little, but most of them are kind of newer. But they're so, every single one of them were so good. I'm sure, I mean, you saw, and so kind and humble, and like in it. I mean, every person on this show, from the cast to the crew, the producers, studio, was just in it and leaning in for the right reasons and super supportive. And I mean, I talk about our camera operators, because Tommy, our main camera operator, he's just was one of the most beautiful people to work with. You get this sort of symbiotic relationship between the camera and him, and especially when you're doing these deeply emotional scenes where you don't want to do take after take after take after take, and you can feel it. It just was like unlike anything else I had experienced working with. And so I digress, but the kids it was that kind of vibe all the way around. We were all like and that starts, I think, at the top with Brian and his work ethic and his ethos and how he kind of runs a show. And this was his first television show, but he was way overextended, poor guy, but also being deeply supported by Paramount and Netflix. And this was the first time I think Netflix had done something with another studio. So we were all like, is Paramount going to get in the way? Are they going to be too notey? Are they going to get too cooks in the kitchen and all that shit? No, they were great. They were really, it was just a very magical alchemy.
Yeah. And yeah, the ensemble is incredible.
And Brian Darcy James is so beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, what a dream. He's so beautiful. I love him so much. So that was like, to have him there, and that was I think that would have been harder if I didn't have somebody who's such a seasoned actor on as Mr. Baker, but with the kids and everything, they were all just so good. And yeah,
they're big futures.
Yeah, I know.
So another question. This one's from Sandra. She says your character is so raw and real, and she could feel the mother's pain. Mm-hmm. She wants to know how you prepared for the scene where Olivia finds Hannah, which is obviously just gutting.
Yeah.
And how many takes did you have to do?
That's a great question, and thank you. I don't know, is that from the internet or from the room?
That's from
okay.
Someone
Hi,
here,
thank
I believe.
you. Okay. Is that from the worldwide internet or it's like so that was the scene that we'd been leading up to, obviously all series. I don't want to but I knew that. And the one thing that we didn't do many takes, which was great. And the biggest thing for me that was so different from that was at the table read. We did table reads of all the scripts. Brian and I were like, don't even put pressure on yourself. Let's just read it. Like, we're just a table read. We don't have to throw down, and nothing has to happen. Meanwhile, that scene comes and we're sobbing. Like, it was like level, it was just like something else coming through us. And I was like, whoa, okay. But what we realized, what was the biggest difference between that and when we actually shot it, was we were audience to that table read as we're reading it too. So we're hearing all the other actors in the entire story. So by the time that scene comes, we are so emotional that it had this other cathartic kind of, almost we were audience to it, right? And then, because everyone was so worked up and emotional at that table read. But then when we went to go shoot it, of course, it's totally different, where I have my objective of, damn it, I come home and there's fucking water on the floor. And how do you not turn off the faucet? And then, you go in. And so it was so kind of just a pure weird thing. I just knew exactly. We blocked it a little bit. I didn't talk to Hannah at all, or Catherine. And we were all super, super quiet. And we sort of just walked through basically what the actions were going to be with Kyle Hernandez, who brilliantly directed the episode. And I had 4 doubles of my clothes because of the water in the scene. And my big thing with Brian was, I don't like to really pitch a lot. Maybe I should more. But even with Shonda, because when you have a great writer, they usually write it. But the one thing I said to him, and was when I talked to the psychiatrist, I said, it feels like when a parent finds a child like this, that they would go into, they're in shock, and that they would try to resuscitate them, even if it's completely obvious that they're gone. And she said, that's right. Only a very small percentage of parents freeze and don't do anything. So that was the thing that, even talking about it makes me very emotional. But that was really important to me. And I said, Brian, I think will you just let me, like, I think we have to try to go for that and just see that struggle, because that's such the pain of it too. And so, and he agreed. And so that was just, that's all I knew. And just the absurdity and the madness of the whole thing took over. And we did just a few takes, maybe 3 or something, or 4. And then finding different, that was the one, I think, I haven't watched it, but the one where I find, like, because it's water all over the floor and kind of holding on to the wall, trying to get to, it's just so crazy. Yeah. So, and there's been a lot of discussion about it. Some people that are up in arms that the episode is very graphic and horrific, but one of the writers wrote Nick wrote a beautiful op-ed about it. And I feel really strongly, and Brian felt very, very strongly, that this should be a very graphic, ugly, ugly thing, and that it should be seen for that. And so that there's nothing left to the imagination. There is nothing left to the imagination, because people still can romanticize it and make it Ophelia floating in a pond with fucking flowers and listening to Morrissey as they go out quietly, dreamily, sleepily, peacefully. And it's not, and it's painful, and it's hideous. And he was very clear about wanting to make sure it was not romantic at all. And that I feel, frankly, that it should be shown in every freaking elementary school or high school and middle school and talked about, and make it part of a regular curriculum so that we speak about these things. And that was also, thank you, but that was also part of the deal, is that Brian's like, the secrecy and the shame still shrouded around this, and the guilt that parents feel, the guilt that everybody, the devastation that it leaves behind, is unacceptable. And the only way to make those changes socially, whether it's about that or the rape scenes or sexual assault, the bullying, the LGBTQ, gender, it's everything that we're dealing with in the macro in our world and culture. And it starts there. So it just, I feel like it needs to be part of a regular curriculum and seen and discussed, and certainly with parents as well, for younger kids. But like let's put it out in the open so we can have language around it.
Absolutely. And finally, there has been some talk about a possible season 2, and some fans are, super into that idea. Other fans feel purists,
right,
that maybe it should stay as it is, as a one-season thing, true to the book. I'm interested in your perspective as a performer. Is it sort of like, well, sure, I want to keep playing this role, or do you see the other side of it as people saying, well, it's a perfect story as is, and let's leave it?
I can see both sides of the story, and I think it's that. That's the great thing about art. It sort of brings up a lot of opinions and feelings and responses. But I think what's one of the great things about television too is just like Fargo. No one wanted to see Fargo the series. They thought it was an abomination and blasphemy against the Coen brothers, even though it had the Coen brothers' blessing. And but when you have a great writer who has a great imagination, and I think that anything's possible. And I think that Brian, one of the things that I'm speaking for Brian Yorkie, but I know one of the things about the series that I like is that it starts showing things from every, different angles and different, so the idea of interpretation or perspective and rewriting, or how one person experiences something and is not how another person does, or how another person. So that is really fascinating to me. And I think he's really got an interesting take on it for season 1. And if there was a season 2, I would trust him implicitly to continue in that sort of theme. So we'll see.
Excellent. Kate Walsh, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for being here. And
thank you very
much. Check her out
on
Broadway and on Netflix. Very busy lady.
I am busy. It's been a busy year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.